please talk, and we will have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah. So I think I'm just thinking that I will probably speak for a little bit and then we just open up for questions. I think it's probably a little bit difficult for me to summarize everything about this journey in every detail, and also it's also depends on kind of the audience, kind of like the interest, because I can focus a lot on just even fundraising for an hour, but I can also talk about other things, right? So very briefly, I guess maybe just introduce myself. I'm assistant professor at Stanford, and before that I was at Princeton as a PhD student, so it's really good to have a talk at Princeton. So I was advised by Sanjeev Arora. And I spent a year at Facebook after Princeton, and then this is my 7th year at Stanford. So since September 2023, I started to work on this startup called Voyage AI, and we got acquired recently by MongoDB. So if you read the news, I think the price is like 220 million and plus some of the retention package. So I think probably the journey started around probably May or April 2023. So, and we spent probably a few months preparing for finding the right ideas, pitching the VC, and we got the funding we started a company around July 2023, and then we spent some more time raising the fund, and then we got a seed round from Wing Venture Capital and Conviction, Sarah Guo, so who is the partner there, and then we a bunch of angel investors around August 2023, and then we started a company. We started with like 5 people, all researchers, and then we hired a bunch of people in engineering department, and now we have 17 people right before the acquisition. Yeah, so I think that's the rough timeline. We raised a Series A in 2024 June. So we raised like $20 million Series A with CRV, Charles River Venture, and a bunch of other ventures. So okay, so that's the timeline, and then the product is embedding models and re-rankers. So actually, the beginning we didn't think too much about it. We think more about the retrieval-augmented generation, this RAG stack. So which basically means that you just retrieve from a lot of data, and then you get some kind of like context, and then you give this context to large language model, and then you let large language models answer questions based on context. And it's widely believed that this can reduce hallucination, which is true. But I think these days, I think the more important thing, in my opinion, is that just the retrieval will let you know the context and the proprietary information and the domain-specific information, right? So hallucination, I think, is kind of like, in some sense, can be solved by accuracy, but lack of knowledge about proprietary information, there's no way you can solve it, right? So even the large language model is Einstein level, right? So it's not like Einstein knows everything about the world. It doesn't know anything about the revenue number of JP Morgan in some region, right? So if you onboard Einstein in JP Morgan, you still have to give Einstein all the internal information so that Einstein can do all the reasonings, so on and so forth. So that's why incorporating proprietary information is very important, even these days when the models are much better and better. So and it's still useful for agents because you have to incorporate proprietary information for the users and retrieve from the users kind of like an email base, code base, Slack messages, all the history, all the relevant information for making the right decisions for the users. So yeah, and at the beginning we started more thinking about building the whole pipeline of the RAG. And during the fundraising process, I realized that maybe we should just focus on a component. So the embedding models, which is the core AI component to enable the retrieval, basically you vectorize. I think for this audience, I assume, actually maybe Mengdi, can I clarify what are the general level of who are the audience? Like these are PhD students at Princeton or maybe
Yeah, I
undergrads?
think they're like mostly like PhD students and who really know the AI. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I think that I don't have to say too much about it, right? So like embedding model is just that you vectorize everything into vectors, and you do a k-nearest neighbor search to do the search, the similarity, semantic similarity search, and this is the main component for the retrieval, the modern semantic based retrieval. it's actually the only AI component there, and another one is called reranker, which is like you take in the query and the document, and you will rank. You output a relevancy score, and then you can re-rank documents based on relevancy score. So basically, these two AI components, which are the most important components or the only AI components in this retrieval stack, and we decided to not do the whole rack stack, but we focus on only the components. And we build APIs, we train the models, and we build APIs for these components, and we serve these APIs to the customers. So, and we charge them based on tokens, so on and so forth. So basically, it's a model company with also the API inference platform. So, yeah, so I think that's I can talk more about that, if anybody is interested. I think that's definitely the right decision in some sense. I think there's in this Silicon Valley, they have this a few words like one of the word is founder product fit, and there's another one is called product market fit, which are just the generally vague words for some concepts that are reasonably making sense. So I think founder product fit is probably means just that whether you have the right skills and the right social network and the right people around you to, or maybe let me just close the door. Sorry, I think so so you have all of this the right kind of like skill set and social network and people around you to be able to build a company for the particular product, right? Because different product, different market have different in some sense different characteristics, right? So if you sell to the consumers, it's a different type of skills, at least different type of mindsets, right? So, and if you sell to a B2B startup, is also a little bit different from a consumer startup. And also depends on the area and domains, right? So some kind of startups requires a lot of vertical expertise. You have to know, for example, if you sell to the oil company, you probably, as a business person there, it's much more beneficial if you know all the CEOs of all of the oil companies in this world. Then I guarantee you whatever the product you have, you can sell to them, right? So like so it's just guaranteed success in some sense because of the network. And in the tech world, it's a little bit different. You need the technology, right? But different technologies requires different people. So, and we focus on embedding models and rankers. I think that's the right decision because at least for me, I'm a researcher by training, and it's much easier for me to assemble a bunch of people who are very hardcore researchers around me, and build this very good product using better training, optimizing the GPU to death, the GPUization to death, right? So, and it's actually a little bit more challenging for me to build engineering team actually. So that's in some sense part of the reason why we are a little bit slower on the engineering side. Of course, we did an amazing job there as well. We hired a few people through my network and some of my network, some of the initial founding engineers. Also, there's also sequencing thing, right? So because of the nature of this company, you have to start with the researchers and then you hire engineers. Anyway, so I think going back to the initial decisions about building the components, I think the main thing is really just I don't talk too much about this, to the VCs, but generally this is the right fit for the people. But that's not only enough, right? Because let's say the best product I'm gonna be able to build is probably papers, but you cannot commercialize that. So it's not only about the whether you have the skill set to do that. That something have to be meaningful and commercially meaningful and has a kind of like a reasonable way to be sold and right. So there needs to be demand for that. And I think that argument is kind of like more about what I said before, like RAG was in my opinion, the right solution compared to fine tuning. There are so many problems with fine tuning. It doesn't even work. In a machine learning sense, in many cases, you somehow forget about things. It's very hard to erase what you fine tuned for. It's very hard to get guarantees to really remember some of this knowledge you have. Is sometimes fine tuning. The models find a very hard time to reconcile the new information, old information. There's a lot of things about the machine learning side, and also there's a huge inconvenience to serve the fine-tuned model because then you don't get the benefit of sharing the GPUs, right? So the reason why all of the model companies are serving the multi-tenant solution by sharing all the GPUs, even, so most of the buyers wants to have a dedicated machine for them because of the security, but OpenAI, Anthropic, all of these companies just insist that it has to be multi-tenant, and that's how you bring the cost down. So that's another reason. Wait, why I'm talking about it? Sorry, I'm losing my thoughts. So basically, um, right. So basically, multi-tenant solution is another consideration here. Um, um, Yeah, so I guess going back to what I was saying. So basically that's why we decide to build this component and only sell the components through APIs. And we have other ways to sell the models. We also made a decision about open source versus closed source. Maybe I can elaborate on that a little bit later. What else? What are the initial decisions? Yeah, I think that's pretty much the main important decisions in this journey. And then we just keep executing. I think the rest of uh, the 18 month or 17 month was really just about how to execute the best possible. You deal with the marketing, the sales, the product, the engineering, the research, so on and so forth, and optimizing everything to death. And in the middle, I have to do some fundraising, some management hiring. Um, yeah, so probably I'll just stop here for a little bit and see what the audience or what the panel are interested, and we can go from there.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with a few questions, and we also have questions from the audience, and Yue and Chi, feel free to also jump in. So
Yeah.
I guess the first question is like, so the initial thesis you had when you started company was different from the final, I would say the final mission or the final thesis, right? So
Yep.
like,
Yep.
how many pivots have there been, or like did you or like when did you make the decision to switch to like working on embeddings, and was that a tough decision?
Oh, when we started to actually work on things, we just start from embeddings. So all of those, the so-called kind of pivoting happens before we actually fundraise. It happens during our fundraising process or the preparation process. When we send a term sheet, we send a term sheet on the condition that we already switched to this component strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I think precisely speaking, I think probably between May and July, we are thinking more about the whole rack, and then probably around sometime in July, maybe let's say mid-July or maybe August, maybe late July, we made a complete switch. So we switched to this new strategy, and then we got a term sheet from the VC. Actually, the VC we work with, Wing Venture Capital, they in some sense they proposed this idea to
Mm-hmm.
us. Before giving us the term sheet and before giving us the money. So basically we discussed with them a lot, and we closely work with them to develop this idea, and then which is not very typical. Typically you probably change your idea yourself, and then you pitch the VC. But I was just the VC proposed the idea. I thought that's a great idea, and I didn't really pitch other people that much.
So
So
that was like
Yeah.
2023.
this is
Sorry.
2023. Yes.
Sorry, you mentioned the VC proposed you to the RAG to you, or proposed to do the component part to you.
The VC proposed the component part.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably in some sense, so they treat this as infrastructure. So that's why they think that it's a good thing, because it sounds like I'm an infrastructure guy. Yeah, for me, this is just you're just training the models, right? I think whether you should call this infrastructure or not is a little bit
So did you have to convince them
debatable.
that you were an infrastructure guy, or they just thought you must be, yeah.
They just think that I'm an infrastructure, guy. I think, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for them, infrastructure means modeling. It means also serving the model. And AI application means you build a rack, or you build a rack for verticals, or you build a rack platform. I think even building a rack platform is a little bit like infrastructure, but it's like a little bit more applied infrastructure than
I
the
see, I
than
see.
building a rack applications.
Okay. So we have two questions from Professor Yusu from in the audience. So first is like, as a professor founder, so how did you deal with the relationship with the university? And what was like the biggest obstacle there?
Oh, I don't know what happens with other universities, but for Stanford, this is very kind of like streamlined, right? So like everyone here, every of my colleagues has at least one startup probably. I think the average is probably 1.5, I would guess. So there's a pretty common process. You just apply for on leave. And Stanford allows 2 years of on leave, and you just do whatever you want during that 2 years.
And there wasn't any like negotiation like regarding like IPs or like student involvement.
Oh, you cannot have any, we don't have any IP relationship with Stanford, so we don't use any of the things we have done with Stanford. So
Mhm.
basically, we just from day one we consult the lawyers. We just do everything to make sure that it's a clear separation with the IP.
And did you involve your own PhD student?
One of my PhD student is a co-founder. Yeah, so he just took a
Only
leave.
one of them, but would that create a disparity within the group?
He just he was on leave, so
He was
basically he
on
just
leave, but
yeah.
other students like stayed in the group and working on their research.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like not everyone wants to do a startup either. Yeah.
Okay. Another question from the audience is like, how did you decide how much funding was right for the seed round? That's
Oh, I think
very specific question. Yeah.
that's a great question, I think, right? So, um, it depends a little bit on how much you can raise and also how much you need. But it's not like you need 100 million, then you can raise 100 million, right? So you have to find the right sweet spot between, in some sense, you always want to raise as much as possible, right? So that's not okay. There's another thing. I don't know how much people, because this is Princeton, so I don't know how um how you are immersed in this what's the right English word for this, like how you are familiar with the Silicon Valley jargon of it. So basically there are a few kind of like, just for people who are, just in case some people are not very familiar. So it's a very simple math equations, right? So there are two variables you can change. One is that the price, and the other is the amount of money you raise. And there's also another thing, which is about whether it's a safe or price round, which is a little bit more on the mechanism side, which let's just ignore that. So basically, what's the price of the company, and what's the how much money you raise. I think the ratio between these two is often relatively um, similar for most of the people. So that's called dilution, right? Basically, how much fraction of the shares you sell to the investors. For seed round, I don't know exactly what's the market, but something between probably 10 to 20%. So of course these days, for AI companies, sometimes you can have crazy numbers. Some I've seen people raise 100 million on 200 million posts, but I've also seen people raise only 5 million on 200 million posts, or maybe raise like Anthropic raised like 2 billion on 60 billion posts or something like that. I don't know. So that's beyond my expertise. Those special cases, but just the typical cases are you probably lose 15%. For Series A, for seed round probably like 10%, maybe for seed round, I think maybe 15% to 20% is also pretty reasonable. So I think we have like probably 20% dilution. We raised 8 million, and the post money valuation was 27. So that's like actually 25%. Now I remember. Yes, 25%. But we didn't do a pre-seed. So in some sense, it also allows you to have more space. If you have a pre-seed, sometimes you lose like 5% from the pre-seed. Yeah. So how much money is the right number? It's very hard to say. If you need 100 million to even start with, for example, if you are training models to compete with OpenAI, I think you have to raise probably 500 millions to start with, or 1 billion to start with, like Ilias startup, like the ICSI, right? But if you are doing a consumer business, you don't even need to use any GP. You don't even you host any GPUs yourself. You just call OpenAI API, and when the usage is not big enough, you don't lose anything. You just the OpenAI API is very very cheap for a small number of usage. Then you probably can just raise like a 1 million. So and the dilution is always very similar. And I think so that's why in some sense raising more is always better in my opinion. The only downside is that raising more, it give you more kind of pressure for the future rounds, because your price will be higher, and then the future round you have to justify the revenue. And sometimes the VC will tell you that if you raise too much more, then you are less careful with spending money, and then
So
it's
did you
better.
have to have positive revenue prior to the second time you raise?
When we raise the Series A, we don't have much revenue. The revenue is close, the revenue is small enough. It's something on the order of like 500K. I think it's probably 300K actually before I raised the money, and then as we are closing, I think we increased to 500K, something like that.
So
but this is like
that's
for Series
between
A.
seed and Series A.
This is right before Series A.
But you sold the company at Series B, right? So did you?
No, we didn't have a Series B, but we just sold the company
Right.
like
So
probably 6 months after Series A.
Then did you have like much better revenue like when you sold the company?
No. So the revenue is never important for any of this.
I see. So
And
this
that,
basically is very different from like vertical applications where people really
that's probably true. So yes. So it depends on the nature of your product. It depends also the headroom people are thinking, right? So for example, Elias Escaber's company can raise $1 billion on $10 billion post without even any product, not even revenue, right? No product, right? So for example, if they believe in the people, they don't necessarily have to see the revenue, right? They can wait for a longer time to see the revenue. If they believe in the people, they don't even have to see the product. They don't even necessarily have to see the idea sometimes. I don't know. Have you seen this kind of like some of this kind of like meme kind of videos, say there's even something called pre-idea, pre-product, pre-revenue fundraising. So anyway, so it depends on many factors, right? So and if you're working on a SaaS idea, right, just a more kind of classical SaaS product, so I believe that revenue is very important because there's no much novelty there in terms of um, the technology, and there's probably not much novelty in terms of the setup, in terms of the mechanism, right? So SaaS was probably very hot 10 years ago, but not as novel these days. So everyone knows how to operate a SaaS company in some sense. So there's no novelty there. So the only way that you can convince VC that you are doing better than others is the revenue, because that's the real signal. So that's why revenue is very, very important there, right? But for AI companies, because to some degree, this is my interpretation, I might be wrong, but I think for AI companies, because there's no any other signals, right? Nobody has revenues, for example, right? Or maybe everyone who have revenues, lose money, right? So all maybe like OpenAI and Anthropic in the first 3 years doesn't have revenue, and they still succeed, right? So that's why people believe that revenue is not very important at the very beginning.
And so okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
So you were the CEO and you did most of the fundraising by yourself, right? But did you have to pick a business partner who like knows the client or who knows like how to talk to enterprise?
I think we didn't sell to enterprise. So we just choose to do PLG, product-led growth. So and that was I wouldn't say it's a tough decision, but it's probably a controversial decision. Like if you ask 10 people, probably 5 people will say do enterprise and 5 people will say do PLG. In retrospect,
All right,
I
what's
think
PLG?
product-led growth, and it roughly speaking, it means that you just don't do much sales. You just like people to sign up and self-serve, right? So you don't bother to talk to the customers. You just let the customers download your sign up on your website and use your API key, or maybe download your software, right? No sales. So you just only use the product to drive the sales, and often the price point is lower because the product is cheaper, but you have a lot of volume. It's like we have like thousands of customers, but each of them spent, maybe $10, $20, $1,000, something like that. So and enterprise sales is like one deal can be $1 million, and then you can raise Series A probably with one deal sometimes. Not exactly, but and we decided to do the PLG partly because I think there's a small part of it is because we don't have someone who is good at sales, but I think the main reason is probably more like we don't believe that this product can be sold like that way. Like I was very committed that people choose the product only because technologically it's better. They don't care about what the sales says, right? Anyway, it's very cheap. It's purely a technical decision, and it's very easy to use. So why you need to get sales involved? But this opinion is a little controversial. I think it's less controversial if you combine this opinion with the lack of sales expertise in our company. It becomes more kind of like if you combine these two opinions together, I think the decision is not controversial in my opinion. So that's why I think it's not a tough decision for me. It's not a tough decision for my investors to believe in me. Yeah,
Got
but
it. So basically you're saying that you didn't really have to have a business partner in the company.
yeah. So by the way, the business partner, another thing is that the business partner, sometimes at the very beginning, when I was kind of like I was preparing for this, I thought a business partner can also handle anything about business, but I think that's not true, right? So fundraising is pretty much only the CEO's job. And of course, some business partner can do that, but not all business partner can do that. And when you say business partner, also, when I was giving the answer before, I was really treating the business partner as sales, because you mentioned that do you need a business partner for talking to clients? But there are other kind of like business focused people. Some people are focusing on partnership with maybe the hyperscalers like Amazon, GCP, so on and so forth. And there are people who are focusing on the internal operations. Do you call that business partner or not? I think sometimes they are also doing the business side. So and some people are probably doing sales and marketing and operation together. Yeah, and even for sales, it's actually sales management and sales themselves are a little bit different. Managing sales has a little bit different mindset from selling yourself. Right.
Got
So and the fundraising is mostly CEO's job. I rarely see people, at least let me think. I think I rarely see CEO not doing fundraising. When the company is very big, first of all, when the company is bigger than Series C, Series D, I think I don't have much expertise there anyways. But from my observation, only when the companies are very big, somebody other than CEO start to help CEO to fundraise.
And so my own last question is like, when and why did you decide to sell?
Decide to what?
To sell
To
the company.
sell. Oh, that's it's a complicated decision, right? Because you have to manage many different kind of like factors. But like eventually it's really a simple thing, right? So you want to maximize the expected outcome of the company, right? So the expected revenue of the company, or expected, financial interest of everyone in the company. And because the company is relatively small, so I think everyone's interests are pretty much aligned as well. It's just that different people have different shares. So basically you just predict your expected future, and maybe you factor in some of the risks, right? So that's probably the only thing that, right? So basically it's a reinforcement learning problem, right? So you just say, I want to maximize my expected reward, maybe factoring in a little bit about risk, right? And you do use all kind of features to try to do that prediction as well as possible, and then you decide some threshold and you say, oh, this is the right timing to sell. Of course, there are other factors. For example, if you don't sell at this point, when you're gonna be when you're gonna be able to sell, at a later point, and also how do you plan the fundraising for the next round, right? So how do you predict the market is gonna go? How do you compete with others? But all of these factors eventually is about the expected outcome, right? And this calculation is very complex and to some degree a little bit subjective as well. So yeah.
But how long do you have to like continue working with MongoDB?
So I have an infinite contract with them, but I have some additional shares which are going to be vested in 4 years. So, yeah, and my previous shares was not vested either. So basically for another few years at least, I guess.
But that doesn't mean like you are not yet a free person.
What do you mean by a free person? I
I mean,
guess.
at least you can return to like doing research, right?
You know, I still do research at Stanford, right? So like, yeah, so yeah, it doesn't really affect the Stanford job.
Cool. Yeah, so I think we have like questions from the audience, and also like I don't know if Ryan and Chi do have questions you want to ask. And for the audience, for the attendees, feel free to just like type your questions in the QA box.
We think we already have a few questions in the QA box right now. I think like especially like Felix Xu was asking, Professor Ma, how did you reach out to pre-seed and seed investors?
Reaching out is not that hard, right? You just okay. I guess depending on who are you, a little bit. For me, it's not that hard because I just find some people to spread the word out, and they will reach out to me sometimes even. So, uh, um, you know, if you don't know those investors, probably you need some people to do a warm introduction for you. Yeah, I think that's pretty much that's it. Just you know, the investors actually, it's actually not very hard to reach the investors. They are very eager to talk to you, in most of the cases. Yeah, maybe I can move on to next one.
Yes, and oh, there are a lot of questions from email, and did you start your business full time from the beginning? Like so far you have been doing 2 years, right? Is it like on leave for 2 years for university?
Yeah. So I pretty much started full time. Just I even maybe I would say probably I prepare a little bit, on but I think I remember there was a NeurIPS, right? So NeurIPS deadline is something like May. I think I didn't really prepare before that. I still spent a lot of time writing the papers. Actually, some of the theoretical papers I really like, which actually has very low citations after 2 years for whatever reasons. But I really like that paper. So I remember I spent like like an all-nighter writing that paper, or maybe a few all-nighters there. And then after that, you know, it's May, right? So and very quickly it becomes the summer. I just didn't take any summer salary. So pretty much you can say I just start full time from the beginning. But
And
that's not always the case. I've seen many people who started part-time preparing fundraising, so on and so forth. And then especially if you have a full-time job, you know,
and
I know
Stanford
there's
allows that basically. It has no problem with doing like 2 years or more, or maybe not 2 years, 2 years more.
Stanford only allows 2 years on
2 years at
leave.
a maximum. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So preparations before launching. Oh, before launching, that's a lot of work, right? So like we have a long checklist for all. It's a project management, right? So like when you do project management, it's kind of like think about what you do even before submitting your paper. It's actually a lot of work. You have to put everything together. So launching a product is even more, right? You have marketing, sales, partnership, all of this, you know, tweets, you know, social media, so on and so forth. Yeah. And but I don't know whether that's what you mean by launching the product. Launching a company, you know, registering a company is very easy. You just make a phone call with the lawyer, and the lawyer will just file the some documents for C Corp, Delaware C Corp, and just one day you got it. You pay probably like $300 or maybe $300 for Delaware, and maybe a few $1,000s for the lawyers. And the lawyers can actually do it for free for you, and charge you later when you have money.
The
So
next question is a bit private, I guess. He's asking whether you invest some of your own money at the start.
no, I didn't. I don't have enough money. You know, my money doesn't make a difference there. So
Okay.
yeah, the initial capital from VC. So yeah. Um, what is the main consideration when picking pre-seed and seed investors? Yeah, so that's I guess pre-seed. This is again a very complex um situation. So it also depends on who you are, and what's your goal, and what's your domains, and so on and so forth. Of course, you know, like when um the price is the same, you pick the investors who are the most useful for you, right? So and what are the most useful is very different for different people, right? So for some people, I've seen the second time founder. I have some friends who have second time founder. They just take money from their old investor friends who they know that doesn't really do anything with them, and let him to do whatever he wants, you know, and don't interfere at all, you know, and they think that's the most useful, right? So and they just take the money and they save the time because you don't have to pitch. You just call your friends and say, oh, this is my second time. I'm giving up all of this to do this new company. That's enough commitment. You just give me some money, and the investors write the check just right away. Say, okay, let me get in. They actually try to just the investors. I'm not sure whether in some cases the investors are trying to get in. In some cases you are trying to pitch investors. The dynamics can be different in different cases. So. And I've also seen second-time founders who find strategic partners who can help them in the long run. And helping them in the long run could mean many things. Where one thing is that they can provide strategic, uh, uh, um, uh, um, they can give you ideas on the strategy, right? So I would say, I've worked with very the best investors. For example, Sarah is really great investor. I really appreciate all of his advice. But I've also heard that I think it's probably a common sense that not all investors can really give you really good advice. In many cases, the CEO and the founders know the company and the market better than the investors. Of course, this also depends on who you are, right? So if you have some experiences, most likely you are probably gonna know your own company much better than the investors who have like 50 portfolio companies to worry about. If you are a very first time founder, it's quite possible the investors know something more than you in some dimension at certain time. This can change, right? Because you want to know your company more and more, right? So and sometimes the strategic value means that whether the investors can keep investing in you when it's a good time or bad time, right? So, for example, sometimes I've seen cases where, for example, you got $10 million from the Series A, and the company is not doing too bad. It's not doing too great either, and but you are kind of like I hope this doesn't happen to anybody, but just say someone raised $10 million and for Series A, and then at some point when they want to raise Series B, they are not kind of like strong enough to raise a lot of money, but they are not doing terribly bad. So the same Series A investors give them another 10 million to extend the runway. It's kind of like they're kind of like trying to rescue you in some sense a little bit. So that could be one value, right? So if the investors has a lot of money and they have deep top pockets, they don't really care about another $10 million, right? So that's a good thing. So but some people don't care about that because they know that their companies will be really good. And this is actually a small dynamical range, right? Because if your company is doing not terribly bad, the investors won't help you, right? Only when you are in a borderline, probably. I don't know exactly, right? This is just take all of this with a grain of salt. Anyway, so that's one strategic value, and another strategic value is that some investors can really just make a lot of connections to. I think it's probably hard for the investors to really make connections to a lot of customers because that's just too much work. But they can introduce you to two key partners, or like the what's called like this is two design partners, which basically means the initial customers, right? Initial high profile customers with brand. So sometimes some investors can do that, and not all investors can do that. What else? Some investors can make a lot of introductions for other things. They can introduce you to the right people sometimes, right? So the CRV investors, I really enjoy working with them. They introduced to me a lot of like candidates for engineering and research. For research, I don't need that much connections, but for engineering, those connections are very useful. So basically, this depends on what you need, and eventually also depends on who you can get. I think generally the stronger the investors are, probably like the better their past results are, probably the more useful they are. But there are many different dimensions, so you don't really have to only work with Secure and A6 and Z, right?
I personally also have some questions about. I'm wondering, like, after your company got acquired, how you foresee the future of the company, and what about how it align with your personal interests, like in terms of like research interests or directions.
I don't know what's the personal interest, right? So like I try to disentangle the Stanford job with the company job. So for the company, I'm just working for the company, right? So I'm trying to maximize the shares values for MongoDB and as much as I can, with my scope and capability, and also take care of the team
In terms
that
of
has
the
been working
future, I
with
mean,
me.
like, are you guys gonna continue working on embedding and this re-ranker, or are you gonna like
Oh yeah,
increase
that's
the
true.
scope or that kind of question?
The scope will increase as well, but we all want to have more people, either through hiring or through transferring some of the existing teams closer to the Voyage AI team, and also we are integrating into their team. So the general scope definitely will increase by a lot, but the core
So,
product is the same.
so you're gonna work as a independent like sub company, or are you gonna just work together now, like
Oh, it's a
move
sub
to this?
team. It's not a sub company for sure.
Okay.
It's just a team, or maybe it's actually probably our team and a few other teams around us. We are gonna be kind of like integrating into those bigger teams.
And also another question I have is like when you were like for example, your design is a very amazing like embedding models. I kind of like wondering in the company like what is the experience of like designing those things like in terms of whether you're still like reading some research papers or like just do everything by yourself like the research paper are not helpful at all and
Research papers still helpful, right? But these days the research papers are often just the opinion in some sense,
mhm.
or kind of like a POC, whatever you call it, right? So it's not like it
Grasping
guarantees that
ideas,
was
that's what you're talking about.
yeah
Yeah.
some raw ideas, right? So um it's kind of like there's no guarantees that what works in the research paper really can work in the industry scale. You still have to do some additional research on top of that. But generally, I don't think we are making any kind of breakthrough research at all, right? So I don't think we are doing research that can be best newest papers. We are probably doing something that can get into news, but we never publish anything. Um,
So you're saying it's more
yeah,
about like perfect all the engineering details and like
yeah, that's right. That's everyone is doing, right? So OpenAI, Anthropic, Google,
I think also in the audience, Kaixuan was asking like, where do you host the embedding models? Like, do you buy your own clusters or like using some
Oh,
like
so first
AWS
of
or
all, you
so?
never buy. Buying, there are other things, we can. I don't think you are interested. Like the buying, there's some accounting kind of like aspects there about buying versus renting, but generally you never buy because even you buy the machines, you don't know where to put them, you don't know how to organize them. You have to rent from some providers. So even Amazon rent from providers, right? So Amazon doesn't, they own the machines, but actually there is another company which actually does the real estate, and that company actually buy the building and put the machines in the building and connect it to the power and make sure that you get a permit for the city from the city, and the CO2 kind of emission is okay, so on and so forth. So anyway, so you rent, and depends on whether it's the training. So for the inference cluster, we are using the cloud, AWS, GCP, so on and so forth. And for the training, we are using some of the more dedicated kind of like training clusters like CoreWeave, Lambda Labs, and Crusoe. Yeah, so on and so forth.
And do you like negotiate some like private deals with them or just use the what
Oh, yes,
they're
always private deals. Yeah. When on this scale, it's just always negotiation. Yeah.
and Jono Parker was asking, how did you recruit your co-founders and colleagues when you initiated the company?
Uh, I mean, it's how do you recruit? It's not necessary for co-founder. It's not like a recruiting. It's more like you start as a team, and of course with some initial ideas, and you kind of like discuss the ideas. Um, yeah, I don't think it's there's anything special process there. It's really just that
You said
like
you start with what one of your students
yeah.
directly on leave, and the remainings are your colleagues at Stanford or some other people you know outside.
So one of them is a student in Yuri Leskovich lab, and he worked with me as a master student, and then he spent 3 years as PhD with Yuri Leskovich. So he was about to graduate at that point, and then we recruited him. And the one person graduated from MIT, from Regina Regina Brazil's lab. Yeah, and one person was a Sanjeev student, ex-student Yuping. So he was at Citadel, and I got him to the Bay Area and got him back to tech. He had an intern with Ilya twice, so I know, and I worked with him for 4 years, 5 years. So in some sense, through your own network, right? These people I knew, most of these people I knew before, and I've worked with them before. I know their skill set, their personality, their ethics, so on and so forth.
Sounds good.
And that's pretty typical for the initial phase. Yeah, it requires a lot of trust at the beginning, at the beginning you have no money, no ideas, no product, no revenue. Why they should trust you?
So like when you actually spend the funds, right? So I think you raised a total of like 25 million, right?
28, yeah.
28. So did you spend more funds on compute or more on people?
I think it's eventually end up being half and half, roughly speaking. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether that's intentional, but sounds like a pretty reasonable balance. But again, this is depending on what kind of companies you are doing, right? So there are very, very few model companies these days, right? I think I can even name it with probably one, maybe two hands, right? So, if you remove all of those big companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Mistral, XAI, who else is training their own models? Very few.
So, but when you sold the company, you still had a pretty long runway, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, because we just only raised the money like 6 months ago, right? Before, actually, even less than. I think it's probably like 5 months after the Series A signed. Yeah.
I personally also have a question about your products. It seems like your product was initially used by, is that a collaboration with like Databricks or MongoDB, or is like your products already used by those companies? Like they already like paying you money to use your products?
No. Neither, right? So we just build our own product, right? The models and the API for the models, right? So the API means that you have a system to serve these models in the backend. And the Databricks and the Snowflake has some collaboration with us. So, and it's kind of like a licensing model where we give them the model weights and they serve our model on their platform.
I see. But most of the revenue is by other people like using your API. That's how.
Yes. Using our direct API, but not using Snowflake and Databricks. Part of the reason is just that you sign a deal with them like in February, and I think that's it. I think we probably signed the Snowflake deal in May last year, and it took them like 4 5 months to even launch the model, and it took some time for them to market the model and sell the model. It just takes so much time to ramp up the revenue.
Oh, so another question from the audience was that what was the biggest moat of Voyage AI? Was it mostly that this embedding model is just much better than all the competitors, or are there other major success factors?
I think that's the biggest moat. And the second biggest moat probably is just that we also invested a lot of time in engineering. So serving the embedding model is not that trivial. It's not like you can have anybody doing that. It's not extremely hard either, right? There are a lot of companies doing the serving of the large language model. For embedding model, there are some part that is easier than large language model, some part that is a little harder than large language model. I wouldn't say it's a very strong moat. The strongest model is still the model, the quality of the model.
Okay, so one research question is so if we, return to academic research, so where do you see theoretical research in AI, I would say, going in the future?
Theoretical research.
Or is there any?
That's a very different topic. I guess I think there are still a lot of
I think in other words, so now that you have been to the other side of the wall, right? Would you steer your own research in different ways?
No, I don't think this is too far away from the theoretical research for AI, so that I think it's probably 2 hops away or 3 hops away, and it's Markov, so you don't actually have to the experience is the I don't think necessarily I have to do a startup to know what I'm going to do for theoretical research for AI. It doesn't really change anything. Yeah. I think to some degree, if you really have, I can even say that this doesn't even change my applied research for AI, because when you like, I'm not doing any research in embedding models, even in applied research. So because it's kind of like already the research side is already like it's more about scaling, right? Scaling and details, right? So the research is not sexy enough in some sense, right? So they are still interesting research, but just not necessarily the right one for academia. So so even my applied research is not related to embedding models.
Any more questions from the audience? So also like, I mean, there are like, I would say like hundreds of like agent startups or even more than hundreds of agent startups like every year, right? And also like all the big players and small players, they're all trying to do very similar things. So how do you think the landscape of the competition will converge?
I don't know. I think this is actually a very good question. I think the root question, in my opinion, depends on the technology. So I actually, maybe this is a question I can ask Mengdi and Shi about it. So basically, my feeling is that right now, it sounds to me that all the agent startup is still just doing kind of like a relatively simple wrapper of the OpenAI models, maybe with some kind of like simple fine tuning, or maybe some React, some this kind of like function calling kind of fine tuning. I'm not sure whether that's actually still sexy enough. It's a bit old. But anyway, so or maybe they have been already done by Anthropic and OpenAI, so you don't have to do them. I don't know exactly, to be honest. So, but my gut feeling is that still the agent, there's no, like, you are still kind of like it's a software company, right? The agent company is like it's a software plus Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini. So and if that's the case, I think my feeling is just that it's kind of a little bit like a consumer business, like you just need the best UI and the vertical understanding, so on and so forth. It's like how Cursor will succeed, right? So I don't know how many people are using Cursor here. I bet probably half of people are using Cursor. I don't know. So you can. I think I would guess it's similar to how the code assistant companies. No, actually, the code assistant company also call them agentic companies these days. Anyway, but I'm just saying like if there's no um enough technical mode, I would guess it's just a lot of small players and they compete with each other. And maybe one player will succeed or a few will succeed, and they are wrappers of the OpenAI and Anthropic. But I don't know whether there's gonna be a breakthrough in the research. Yeah,
Also,
and actually, I'm curious. Like, I don't know what do you think and what Alchi thinks. So I don't know why there's not enough research for the agents,
I mean, there
like
are
in
tons of
academia.
research papers on agents, right? It's just very difficult to tell what are the what's groundbreaking about them, yeah.
Yeah, so why they are not good? Yeah, very strong, outstanding papers on agents. I guess I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, we have a question from the YouTube channel. So how much did the core technical product evolve when transitioning to the stage of acquiring customers? Was it things you were expecting, and what were like unexpected hurdles?
No, I think not really. I think you should think about the customers from day one so that you want to minimize this surprise, ideally. Unfortunately, I don't think we had any real surprises. We knew that some of this won't solve some of the customers' problem, where you have an API, there's not enough compliances, reliability guarantees, so some of the big customers wouldn't use it. But we knew that from day one, and we make that decision intentionally. We say we don't care about those kind of customers. It's not like we don't care, but we don't serve those customers at the beginning.
Okay. So another question from the audience, which is a little bit private. So how did you decide the like salary levels or equity allocation for the
Yeah,
staff as well as
this is
yourself?
not that hard in a sense that for the first few people, I think, the conventional wisdom is very simple because you can just use Carter or I think there's something called PAVE, and there are other places we can buy data. You can see the market, how much equity each of the level has, and depending on your valuation, depending on the size of the company, the level of the people, so on and so forth. So there's a market rate, and you can choose 90% quantile or 70% quantile, depending on how important the talent for you are, right? For the initial people is a bit more, the dynamic range is a bit bigger. So I think that requires some more thoughts depending on how important and how much contribution each person can have. So, and also what's the nature of the company, right? So yeah, so for some companies it's like the people are the most important thing, and like what we do. So we are very suppose like like how do I say this? Like I think the company is very generous to people in some sense in terms of the equity and salary to some degree. Because for us the talent is everything, because this is very technical. But I can also see other companies which is much less generous. And I don't mean generous. I don't think generous here means just any moral sense, because anyway, but just there are companies which requires a different type of workforce, and it's a bit different.
Cool. So I guess I'll conclude with one last question.
Yep.
So like for like I would say like PhD students who are like still doing research, and if they want to think about like starting their like own business at some time, right? So where do you think they should start with? How do they start tapping into the space?
Oh, for PhD students to do a startup?
Right. Or to consider doing a startup after graduation, especially like for like Princeton people, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess there's also a Princeton part, which is like, at Stanford, I think the hardest part is that how do you even stay once this idea is in your brain, how do you even finish the PhD, and whether you should whether you should finish the PhD, right? So I think at Stanford, if you drop out from PhD, you just automatically get a few $1 million investment. Yeah, I think even for undergrad, right? So if you have an undergrad is even more, because it's kind of like what you lose is too much, right? So if you drop out from undergrad, it's like if you fail, you do not have a degree, and you don't have a second chance. So basically, you were on the track of being a Stanford undergrad and going this kind of like a very stable life, but then the alternative is that you only have a high school degree, and you just say this, they don't even care about what the idea is. Like this is like they don't even care about what your name is, just a Stanford undergrad dropout. That's it, right? So it must be a good idea, otherwise, unless this person is crazy. And actually crazy sometimes is good for a startup. I think crazy is actually good for startup. Like you have to be to some degree crazy, so that you are the outliers. Anyway, so sorry, so I digress a little bit. For Princeton, I think it's the same thing. If you drop out from Princeton, I think you come to Silicon Valley, you find some investors, you say, I'm gonna drop out from Princeton. You're gonna get some money, I'm sure. Like I think $1 million, I think is probably pretty easy. But the question is whether you want to do that, right? It's a huge risk, right? So that's why they give you the money. But in most cases, it's kind of like you are buying a lottery, with your career, right? And for them, for the VCs, they have millions of dollars. They don't even care, right? They give you $1 million and they don't talk to you for 5 years even, right? So they don't have to talk to you for 5 years. But this is your career. So I think that's probably the hardest part. Like how, so okay, so yeah, sorry. So I don't generally, except for special cases, I don't recommend to drop out from PhD. But sometimes for startup, it's about special cases. And after PhD, if you want to do a startup, what do you do in preparation? It's a bit weird, right? Because PhD is not supposed to, generally it's not supposed to before that, right? So like if you want to do a startup, somehow you shouldn't do a PhD in some sense. Okay, depending on what kind of startup it is, right? If it's really about training the models, sure. But still, like having just only a PhD, I think you need a few people. Like training models is not that easy, and it requires so much capital, right? So you need a certain scope. You need, like for us, like there's one professor and 4 PhD students to start with. So yeah, so I think And also generally having a startup that trains models is not that it's really hard, right? Like I think we are probably, this is probably the most I would say I'm proud of myself being able to do this on this scale. Like I think I'm proud of my team doing that. I think they are very, very frugal about how they use the GPUs. They are very careful, and they get up at night, 5 a.m. right? Like try to not waste, look at the results and schedule the right next experiment so that you don't waste that 3 hours, which costs like thousands of dollars, right? So, it's very hard to compete without enough capital, right? So if you can raise $1 billion, it's a different game. Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, so this is really a hard question. So maybe I would say just that maybe make your research a bit more useful for if you have a technical breakthrough, I would say that's a very easy way to have a startup after PhD, right? Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah.
That's very good advice. So we want to like ask students to continue working on their research.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and this is a genuine answer. It's not like I'm not trying to play any game. I think at least that's one mode that can make the startup successful, right? If you have really technical breakthrough, it's very easy to raise money. It's very easy to attract people. It's very easy to build a product and have moat, so on and so forth. Everything will be great.
Do we have more questions? Cool. Yeah, this is a very, very nice discussion. Thank you for sharing. We have
Thank you
like
very
a
much.
full room of audience.
Okay, thanks so
Okay.
much. Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
Tengyu.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.